Well, good evening, everybody. First thing, it's real. These days, of course, challenged hairstyles have got a bit more popular with President Trump and all that, but this is the genuine article. I had considered talking to you this evening about the National Trust and Easter eggs, sorry, just eggs. And thought slightly better of that. And I had thought of talking to you tonight about the post office. The post office has just had its first year making a profit, which we're very proud of. But I thought, as all of you here are probably very capable business leaders, that I would talk about a business subject, and a business subject that's quite close to my heart, which is the art of turnaround management, and in particular, working with private equity. So I thought, first of all, it might be quite interesting for people just to look back briefly on a few of the things that I've been involved with. The first transaction I did, which was a turnaround, was Kenwood, and that was back in 1989. And we bought that company for 52 million and floated it, I think, at a value of around 104 million. And you can see there that the results of the business went from pretty much break even to making what was then quite a reasonable profit of 18 million. I then took a slightly different step and went to work for a family company, Clark's, in the shoe business, and inherited actually a company that was in quite a lot of trouble. We had to execute a massive turnaround program. We closed much of the capacity in the West Country. We had to refurb the shops. We had to change the shoe designs. A lot of people just wouldn't wear Clark shoes because they were far too, let's say, unfashionable. I had a lot of friends whose wives would absolutely not be seen dead in a Clark shoe shop. One of my biggest achievements, I always feel, is that at the end of my stint, we did actually have quite a few people, quite a few women, who actually felt not embarrassed to wear Clark shoes. And in the process, we managed to move this business from making 20 million up to almost 85. And I think at the time, the company had never done better than that. And we invested very heavily on TV to move the brand image of Clark's. We had a campaign which some of you may remember, which was "At Your Shoe Size, Not Your Age," and it struck quite a chord, and we did manage to sort of create something of a buzz around the business. I then, it's quite interesting, I was very happily ensconced in Hampshire, and I started talking to a private equity firm about the possibility of buying Kwik-Fit. And they were based in Edinburgh. And my wife is Belgian, had never been to Scotland. And she came home one evening. I said to her, "Look, darling, the good news is I've got this fantastic opportunity to run a company, and I think we can do really well. The bad news is it's in Scotland." And I sent her up there. And it took her quite a long time to get used to the idea of living in Scotland. But we did end up very happily in Edinburgh, taking a business that was virtually making a very, very small return. We more or less trebled the profits in the space of 2 or 3 years. And that business, which the backers bought for around 300 million, was sold for about 850 million pounds about 3 years later. So very good return for the private equity firm. I should mention in passing, one of the very powerful things about private equity, I don't know how many of you have been involved with private equity, but I'll just explain briefly. It's a very simple model. Essentially, private equity firms take in funds, and these days they charge around 1.5% management fees and take 20% of any increase in value. A typical fund lasts, let's say, 10 years. Now, if you're a large private equity firm, and a large one may be raising 5–10 billion euros or pounds, and the more successful ones are doubling or sometimes 2.5 times that value, you don't need to be a genius to work out there's an awful lot of what they call carried interest being taken by the partners in that firm. So if you effectively have a 10 billion fund, which the big companies now have, and you're increasing the value by 15 billion, then there's 3 billion pounds of carried interest potentially, which is shared between a relatively smallish number of people.